Okay, so you should all be able to see this simple spreadsheet that I have up on the screen. So if somebody can't see that or hear that or hear me clearly, please let us know so we can address that situation. And here we have a spreadsheet that has some sales reps with what they sold in various 1 through 4 quarters. And this the totals is simply a sum going across. And what I'm going to talk about is something, a logical function where we can say, well, if the sales are greater than a certain amount, and I've just chosen to say if they're greater than 140,000, then these people are going to earn commission. So that's the concept of the logical function, the if function. If this criteria is true, I want you to do this. If the criteria is not true, I want you to do that. And you are the one who sets the criteria. In this case, I'm saying the total sales greater than 140,000. And if that's true in this case, I'm just going to say the abbreviation for commission right now. And then if it's not true, no commission. And then we'll get into how to figure the commission. So right away, I'm going to go to the Formulas tab, and here are the logical functions. And as you can see, there aren't that many. Some functions like financial have lots and lots of them. And the main ones and the ones we're going to deal with today are if, and, or. So we're going to start with the if, which is the most basic. Okay, and here's the dialog box, the function arguments box, which gives you the 3. First, set up your condition, then what to do if it's true, what to do if it's false. So the condition in this case is that this total sales is greater than 140,000. I've just arbitrarily picked that. Now, if it's true, in this first case, we're just going to have it return a piece of text saying commission. And because we're doing text as opposed to a value or a formula, we're going to have to put it in quote marks. That's a generally how we do it in these function argument box. So I'm just going to put an abbreviation for commission and put it in quotes. And if it's not true, if the F4 value is not greater than 140,000, then again in quotes, because it's a piece of text, no commission. Okay, and it's telling us right now that in this case this is false, so it's going to do no commission because it's false. So I'm going to say okay, and there it is. And when I autofill it down, you can see that only the 2 where this is not greater than 140,000 are the ones that are going to say no commission. All right, so now what if I wanted it to, instead of saying commission or no commission, I wanted it to actually fill in a commission. So I'm going to go to my function arguments box again. So I'm going to hit the little FX button to open that up. I could type it directly in here, but it makes it easier, I think, when it's spread out. And so if that is true, that the total is greater than 140,000, what do I want it to do? I want it to take that total sales and I want to multiply it by, let's just say 10%, 0.1. And if it's not true, the person's not going to get any commission, so I'm just going to put in a 0. And so when I autofill it down, you can see that the 2 that did not make it are not getting any commission, and the other ones you can see clearly that it is 10%. So that's a very common way to use this function to help you figure things out and have it automated. And if we said, oh, well, that was a mistake, it was supposed to be 42,000, then it's going to change things and it's going to automatically figure that out for you. So if this changed, the commission is going to increase and so forth. Okay. So what if you then decide, or your boss decides, that we're going to give a bonus as well because the commission is only based on what the total for the year is, and I am concerned, or maybe your manager is concerned, that the people are going to, some of the sales reps might work very hard in the first and second quarter to get to their quotas and then spend the summer playing golf. So we're going to incentivize them to make a certain quota every quarter. And for that, we're going to use what's called an AND function. So again, logical functions AND. And in this case, as you can see down here, you can put in up to 255 conditions, so many more than you would actually want to do. In this case, we're going to put a condition for each quarter, so we're going to have 4 of them. So I'm going to say logical 1 is if the first quarter is greater than 40,000. And logical 2, also, I'm just going to use greater than 40,000 for simplicity's sake. I could make them all different if I wanted to. Quarter 3, greater than 40,000. And quarter 4, notice it just keeps adding more spaces for me to add more conditions. Greater than 40,000. And I'm going to say OK. And right now it's just telling me whether they get a bonus or not, true or false. Okay. Now, again, if I wanted to actually have it figure a bonus for me, maybe it's 20% in this case, I could now use this AND function and nest it within an IF function. Okay, so that is the another way that this becomes more and more powerful. Okay, and function becomes a condition within the if function. So I'm going to go to the formula in the formula bar, and I'm going to put in if and open a parentheses. And this whole AND function, which has 4 different criteria for the 4 quarters, becomes the criteria portion of the if. And then since all the different sections are divided with a comma, I'm going to put in a comma. So if this is true, this is my criteria. If they're all greater than 40,000, what do I want it to do? I want it to take the total and multiply it by 0.2. And then I'm going to put in another comma, because if it's not true, I'm going to say 0. And then I'm going to close that parentheses that I opened up. And so now the first guy, it's not true, so he doesn't get a bonus. But you can see in the other ones that there are bonuses here that are based on the total commission, 20%, assuming that every quarter was greater than 40,000. And even if we make, for the first one, for instance, if I change one of these to over 40,000, it's not going to give me a bonus. It does give him a commission. It's not going to give him a bonus because that is an AND function, which means he has to be greater than 40 in quarter 1 and quarter 2 and quarter 3 and quarter 4. So I'm going to undo that last one, that last change, but I think you can see how that works. Now, if my boss then comes back to me and says, well, that's a little too hard-nosed and we're going to lose people because they're not going to get the commission and blah, 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 and he wants to make it much more flexible, much easier, we can change AND to OR. And so that's another function, logical function, saying if it's greater than 40,000 in quarter 1 or quarter 2 or quarter 3, etc., then they're going to get this 20%. So now in this case, they all get it, because in each case there was at least one quarter in which they made over 40,000. So that's another way where you are nesting a logical function, in this case within another logical function, and it gives you the ability with an if function to test more than one criteria. Okay, let's go to another sheet and do another example of this. So let's say I wanted to indicate whether this is profitable, whether each of these territories are profitable or not, based on whether their total sales for these 3 months are greater than the expenses. Okay, so I'm going to go to an if function, and in the if function I'm going to say E5 total, let's say greater than or equal to, I could use the expenses. If that's true, first I'm going to say profit okay, made a profit. And if it's not true, I'm going to say bankrupt. Okay. And if I autofill, you can see that in some cases, the expenses are higher than the total, and so they're bankrupt. And if I wanted to, I could move this down, oops, since the pattern is the same, except it doesn't belong there, you know, and it would test the same thing in all of them. So that's one thing that we could do. And of course, if we did not want to use profit or bankrupt, we could go back into the function arguments and we could put in a formula for what to show and so forth. So that's just another example. Now, here in this Vlookup, it gets a little bit more involved. Also, this is a way I'm going to show you of nesting, because frequently we're using the if function in conjunction with other functions, and frequently that other function is a lookup function, which I have here. So let me explain what this means first. And what I'm doing here is doing a lookup function. I have done a couple of webinars explaining that, but you might not have been in on one of them. So here I'm saying in this little payment function, this is really a payment, at what interest rate and at what term, and so forth. What's the payment going to be, and what amount I'm borrowing. And so what I wanted to do here, I have a credit rating table, and at a certain credit rating, what's the rate you have to pay for interest. And so here there's a lookup function that is saying I want you to look up what is in B5, and I want you to look it up on this little table or array, and I want you to return to me the information in the second column, which would be the rate, the percentage. So first we have a number 12 in here, so the rate is 12, and so if it's looking that up, it's going to be a 10.5% interest rate, which is what's happening. So if I change that 12 to, let's say, a 4, it's going to go to this chart, find number 4, go across, and return to me the 6.5%. If I change it to number 15, it's going to go and find the 15 and bring it over and find 12%. So that's the idea of what a lookup table does. And of course, the table could be a lot more involved, a lot bigger. It could have multiple columns to it. In this case, it's just a 2-column table. The first column always needs to be in ascending order in order for it to look up the next level or drop back to the prior level. So that's the deal with the lookup. Now, what if I wanted to have it tell me that if the interest rate was a certain amount, that it was too high, and I wanted it, instead of to figure out that I had needed 11% interest, I wanted it to tell me too high. So we're going to change the lookup formula, and we're going to create an if function here. So we're going to do equal if, and then I'm going to open a parentheses. So if I look this up and it is greater than 7%, let's say, so that's going to be my criteria within my if statement, the whole lookup statement. So look up this credit rating on this table and bring me the answer from column 2 that matches my credit rating. And if it's greater than 7%, and then I'm going to put a comma, so that's my criteria. And if it's greater than 7%, I'm going to put in quotes because it is text. I'm going to say too high, and then a comma. And then what to do if it's not greater than 7% is I want it to actually do the Vlookup. So I'm going to repeat that, Vlookup, and I want it to look up the B5. And I want it to look it up within this table. Whoops. Okay. And I want it to return me the answer from column 2 of the table. And then I'm going to close the lookup function. And I think I need another closure of the paren because of the first one here. And there we go. And it's too high because I have it set at 15 and 12% is greater than 7%, so it's too high. So if I tell it, okay, my credit rating is 3, then it's not too high. It goes to 3 and it looks across and it finds 6%, which is fine. If I tell it that my credit rating is 9, then it's going to tell me too high because 9 leads to 9%. Okay? So whether this is something you want to do or not, in terms of having it return the piece of text, I just wanted to illustrate the capability of making the lookup, of nesting the lookup statement within the if statement and having it return information for you. I see there's somebody, okay. Okay, I want to check and see if there are any questions in the chat. Okay, so it is doing a lookup there. Now, here we have a different file I'm going to open up. And we have an inventory sheet here that has products, part numbers, vendors. The vendors is going to be the important thing here, and the unit price and the number of units. And certain vendors are going to get a discount, and other vendors are not. And there's a lookup table on another sheet that indicates the vendors and whether they have a discount or not. Okay, so this is the first thing to give them whether they have a discount as a yes or no. So we're going to do a lookup, a Vlookup. So I'm going to do equal Vlookup. This is another way, instead of going to the formulas box and calling up the function from there, if I know the function, I can just start typing it and then open up the dialog box like this. Okay, so I'm going to put it up here so I can see it. And I'm going to look up the vendor. Okay. And where I'm looking up the vendor is on this table here in the second, the other sheet. Okay, and the column that I want to return the information from is column 2. So I'm going to say column 2. And if I say okay, you can see that the first vendor treetop does not get a discount. If I autofill that down, whoops, something, oh, I know what I did. I do this all the time, and it's good because now I have to indicate to you that you have to remember to make this an absolute function. So I have to do that by putting in those little dollar signs here, which just stand for absolute. And then when I say okay and I copy it down, now it works. And the reason for that, of course, is if it's looking at this a little table here going from C12 to D19 and I don't make it absolute, well then the next one when I copy it down is doing this, and the next one is doing this, and the next one is doing, soon I'm in an area where there is nothing. All right, so when you make it absolute with the dollar signs, it's always looking at these cells to find the answer in this case as to whether the vendor gets a discount or not. So it's very important to make that absolute, and those little dollar signs are just a way of indicating that it's an absolute function. Okay, so now we know whether there is a discount or not. And what we also want to know is what's the final price. Let's assume the discount is a 10% discount. So they're paying 90% of the total price. So I'm going to make it an if statement. Okay, equal if. And I'm going to open that up. And so I'm doing an if statement. And if the G column, which is indicating whether they have a discount or not, if that equals yes, and again, because that's text, I'm putting it in quote marks, then if that's true, what I want them to do is take the unit price times the number of units, right? And I have to put that in parentheses, which I did not do because I'm going to be multiplying that by 0.9, 90%. And if it's false, then I'm just going to say take the unit price times the number of units. And so this one does not have, the first one, Treetop, does not have a discount. So it's just multiplying 30 by 100 and getting 3,000. Oh, I did something wrong here. Okay, something is amiss. Let's see what that is. Let's see what's wrong. If G4 is yes, E4 times F4 times 0.9. Something's wrong here. I don't know why that is there. Okay, let's see. Let's see if that autofill. Yeah, that's it. I had some extra little doodads in there, which I didn't need. Okay, so again, I'm nesting within the if function. I'm doing a test. If this says yes, okay, then take the discount, multiply the unit by the price, but multiply that by 0.9. And if it's no, so you can see that this one is yes, and it's not coming out to 40,000. It's taken a discount, and so forth. So that's a little bit of the same concept, that you can nest one function within another, and it becomes a lot more powerful for you. Okay. So are there any questions on the chat? Well, I think probably everyone can start to use this. It's a pretty interesting and powerful function. And I